At this point, I'll call for any additions or deletions to the agenda. I have none. So I think we will proceed, but as we move into the agenda, I'd like to formally welcome Butch Shaw and Chief Pontbriand as new members of the council. So welcome to your first meeting. Um, Moving ahead on the agenda to the approval of meeting minutes, we have two to look at today. First will be the regularly scheduled March 5 meeting of the council. I will entertain a motion on those meetings to accept those minutes.
Trevor would move.
Moved by Whipple. Do we have a second, please?
Jim Whitcomb, second.
Seconded by Whitcomb. Thank you. Any discussion, modifications, amendments, etc.? Okay, I had none myself, and hearing none, I'll move the question. All of those in favor of approving the minutes of March 5th, 2025 signify by saying aye and or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll abstain since
Aye.
I wasn't at that meeting.
Okay. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. The minutes of March 5 are approved. The second set of minutes is for the second meeting of our month on the third Tuesday in regard to potential hearings. That was March 18, 2025. I will accept a motion to accept those minutes of March 18. How's your chance to get on the agenda on the minutes? Come on.
Whipple will move. I was trying to give somebody else a chance. Whipple.
I saw Trevor. He's trying to maintain his
I'll
face.
second.
And then we got a second. Okay. Any adjustments, amendments, or changes to those minutes? I had none myself. Hearing none. All of those in favor, vote yes by signifying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Seeing some movement. Okay. Any opposed? Signified same. Seeing none, the motion carries. The minutes of March 18th, 2025 are approved. We have a couple of things on the agenda today. Some of those regular items. This is for our new members, and the executive director updates, and then we'll move into some other matters of both education and updating the committee, as well as taking discussion on the FIP statement.
To forgive me for interrupting, folks. I froze up here, and I'm not sure if it was the chair that froze up. Did he move to me?
Yes, it's over to you, Chris. Yes, the executive director.
Okay, thank you. I don't know where I had that glitch, but I lost connectivity here for some reason. Everybody hear me okay? Okay. I'll start with my director's updates for this meeting. We'll start off with the IACP Women's Leadership Conference that I believe that I spoke to early in March. That leadership conference originally was supposed to take place here at the Academy in September of this year. We heard back from IACP that they had opted to move that leadership conference to the Burlington area simply for logistics, food venues, travel accommodations. But we heard back recently from them again that leadership conference is going to be looking more like in the avenue of November of this year. Apparently lodging was not able to be accommodated for them in September in the Burlington area. So they are looking in the November timeframe, and when we have more information on that, we will push that forward to you. So I'm switching between documents here. So any questions on that before I go on? Okay. Second piece of information is around the FIP policies. As you know, the council adopted its recent FIP policy. We were still working with some agencies to make sure that they had adopted the policies of the council or an approved policy of their own. To date, just for council's awareness, there are still three that are in process. One is the town of Richmond, who, if you might remember, they joined us at one council meeting not too long ago to discuss what their concerns were. Their policy did not meet the council's policy. They have since submitted another recommended policy with some more changes to it. That's currently under review by the Attorney General's office at this point. So we hope to have an answer for them shortly. If council members remember, back in December last year, I believe it was, Essex County Sheriff joined us for a meeting. Their policy was deemed to be non-compliant. Sheriff Colby met with the council and expressed what his concerns were. And he was given some suggestions and some advice on how to move forward with his policy. I did receive some email communications from him in February. Again, looking some further discussion about the issues that he saw as concerns that he wanted to have adopted in his policy. I responded to those concerns, and I have not yet heard back from him for another modified policy for review. So until such time as we do receive that, by statute, the Essex County Sheriff's Department shall be deemed to have adopted and shall follow and enforce the model policy issued by the council. The last one is the town of Hartford. The town of Hartford is in a different situation where the town of Hartford has adopted the council's policy. So their police department is covered by that policy. However, the town of Hartford also adopted a welcoming ordinance back in 2020, which provides a bit more protections, but those protections were found to be in contrast to the council's policy. And there was some concern because the town adopted a policy, whether that would take precedence for the town's police department simply because it encompassed all of their employees. So that's an ongoing discussion. The town of Hartford has some folks that are meeting in the future with the Attorney General's office to discuss those concerns and see if they can iron those out. So that's it for the FIP policy. Any questions or concerns on those? Okay, hearing none. I'll move on to just some position discussion here. As folks know, we have a training coordinator position that will be open at the end of this class. That's also a key position because that individual also provides use of force training, which is key to a lot of other things that we do here. So I just want to make sure that everybody is aware and knows out in law enforcement that we do have a vacancy. It is being advertised, which means that we are in competition with you, law enforcement agencies, because very often folks come to work here from the law enforcement profession. Not always, but oftentimes they do. So I just want to make that clear that we do have that position open. We are not targeting anyone. We hope that we will receive applications for that. But that's one of the concerns that we have around our positions here. As most folks know on the council, that while we do have a pretty sustainable schedule that's regular, we have a pretty limited retirement program, a 30-year retirement program, which is not really conducive to enticing people to come work for us. One of the larger discussions we'll be having with the council and the council's support of us and what we have to offer here. But just pointing that out that we do have that position open. And we also will be welcoming a staff attorney to replace Kim finally. That staff attorney will be starting on June 2nd. His name is Chris Burkett. Folks might know him as a former deputy state's attorney from Addison County. He was a former state's attorney from 2004 to 2018 in Addison County. He also served as the interim state's attorney when the retirement of a state's attorney took place there. And he's also managed his own legal practice since from 2018 to present. So we're looking forward to him starting in June. He stopped by here yesterday in person. We have things already lined up, so we'll be having future discussions with him hopefully soon. Any comment or concerns or questions on that position?
Oh, other than Chris, let me just thank the committee that worked in the process of recruiting for that position. It was work is usual, but an important position. So I'd like to publicly thank the committee for that effort.
Agreed. Thank you. Moving on to a few other things. Entrance testing. Lindsay and I met with NTN, I think it was yesterday, could have been the day before. We've discussed this at the last council meeting just about the fact that we are in contract negotiations with them. We met with them again just to go over what their facing documents will look like for agencies when they become available. We are moving forward in that contracting process. There's a piece now that they're just deciding on how they have to put wording in the language and what that's going to look like moving forward with ADS. So we're closer, not there yet, but I do anticipate that being soon. Having said that, there's a couple of things that I just want to bring up for all law enforcement agencies on this call to also be aware of is that we will be making mandatory entrance testing beginning the first of the year in 2026, just so that we can be fair to all agencies and all agencies have plenty of heads up notice when that's coming. However, entrance testing has been a large issue for law enforcement agencies, and they are the ones who have asked for this to be remedied as soon as possible. So having said that, as soon as the testing is available online, we are going to push that out and make it available for agencies to take and send recruits to. And also for their awareness that the entrance test, as in past, when we had an entrance test, that test will be good for a year's time. So as soon as it's available, if you want to send your folks to that, just know that that test will be good for a year. So that will be one step ahead of some of the other requirements that you'll have to do to get somebody into the academy. So as soon as it is available and online, we will make folks aware of that, but we will make it mandatory at the beginning of 2026. Any questions on that piece moving forward? Colonel Steadman.
Thank you, Director. I'm just curious, and this is mainly with how our process works. We have done most of our testing for the February Academy prior to January. So will those folks, how will that work? They'll have to still do the testing prior to entrance into the February Academy if they've been. Hope is very, very efficient. She usually tries to have the whole packet to the academy like in December. So, which I think maybe even is a deadline. So I'm just curious, will they, how's that going to get sugared off? If someone's packet is been sent in, will they then have to take the written test, or just curious, trying to figure that out on my end.
So yes, after the first of the year, they will have to take the written test, but it will be available far ahead of that.
Okay.
So
All right,
you will
Great.
be able to have that person take that test online and get that piece done so that when you submit your packet, it literally should be complete.
Thanks, sir.
Sure thing. Okay, moving on from that, also attached to that as well, PT testing. I just want to bring up the fact that we will make that as well mandatory for all levels of entrance into the academy beginning in 2026. It is already in council rule and has been for some time that entry into any level of certification program requires PT testing. Again, I think I've mentioned this before. I don't have an answer for the council why that hasn't been mandatory for part-time or level 2 training. I can make some assumptions, but I want to make sure that we are following council rule. And I think it's only fair to make sure that agencies have a date that they can be well aware of, and that's in the future. And it makes sense to have that along with the entrance testing. So we will push it out yet again, but I just want to remind agencies that PT testing, even for folks that you're going to be sending for the future level 1 and level 2 classes, will require a PT component to that. Any questions on that piece moving forward? Great. Then a couple of really one other thing, well, two more things. One is I just want to make folks aware that we had a slight change in our process this week with a particular recruit, where we had a recruit that resigned from the agency that they were employed by while training, and was then subsequently employed by another agency. As you can imagine, that created some heartburn and kind of a scrambling for what is that process? How does that process play out? In checking council rules, there is nothing that would have precluded us from having that recruit continue. All the prerequisites would have been met for that recruit to stay in. And again, our purpose is to train and put people into the field as successfully as we can, and that's what we continue to do. Having said that, it is problematic for agencies that go through the time and effort to put somebody into the academy and then all of a sudden are surprised by a change. So I just want to be clear, not only with council members so that they're aware of this, but also for all law enforcement agencies, that as has been the practice and will continue to be the practice, when I learn of any information like that, that will be shared with the two agencies that would be impacted by any of those changes. We, prior to any academy class starting, we have those discussions with TAs that come here and work with us, making sure that there are no efforts to recruit somebody from another agency while they're here. That would be, detrimental to the profession, also detrimental to a state our size and how that impacts each agency. We all know that folks are working hard to recruit and also find folks that they're going to be sending here. So when that changes for them, especially unexpectedly, that's hard to manage. So from our perspective, our mission is to train. We will continue to do that. We don't want to be put in a situation where we're viewed as being complicit in that process or not making agencies aware when we find out information. Having said that, we don't control what recruits do or employers do, or what they do on their time when they're not in the academy, or conversations that they have with other recruits. So I just want to make it clear, our process is that we do everything that we can to discourage any type of behavior that would lead to recruits either leaving or jumping from one agency to another while they're in our house. And we will make sure that if we do learn of any of that type of behavior or any circumstances surrounding that, that as soon as we do, that information will be passed on to the agencies that are going to be impacted by that. Any questions on that? Okay, and hearing none there, the last piece I have is really just a kind of a information based, and also making sure that, again, this is information that gets out to our law enforcement partners who attend these meetings as well. We, Vagar and I, and with the assistance of Trevor Whipple, we're at the Chiefs and Sheriffs meeting back in March, which was held at the Fire Academy. this was just another opportunity where we could provide an overview of Act 56, what that process looks like, and the changes with the new code of conduct that have taken place. We did have some discussion about what we see for complaints that come into the academy, and also how we have seen, by way of some complaints that we receive, what I would term as, and I know this is a strong term, but a weaponization of the Act 56 process, where some folks might utilize that for their own purposes. Having said that, I want to be very clear that Act 56 complaints come to the academy through any means. They can come anonymously, they come through our web portal, they can come by mail, by phone call, by email. Again, the majority of the complaints that we get are forwarded to us by law enforcement agencies, which says to me that they're doing the right thing. And when they get a complaint about an officer, if it meets the criteria around unprofessional conduct, they forward that complaint on to us and make us aware of that. Having said that, when a complaint comes to the academy, it gets vetted first through the executive director. And if that complaint is deemed credible, then it gets forwarded back out to the agency for investigation if it involves a category A or B. And if it's a category C, which is a council process, that gets investigated by the council. We've had some conversations where complaints or information goes directly to professional regulation subcommittee members. That is not the process of how the complaint process works. They are the subcommittee of the council that reviews the information that gets vetted through us first and then gets sent to them. So I just want to be clear on that process to make sure that folks are aware. And in regard to Act 56, one of the things that I'm troubled by a little bit that I see continually, and just saw another one very recently, is around the scope of practice for level 2 officers when they are here for training. As folks know, when you come here through a level 2 certification process, you get your initial training at the academy. Once you get that initial training, you leave here with a provisional certification that allows you within the next year to take the core and elective classes that are required, and then to also work with the FTO from your agency to have that required time documented and show that the person is capable of fulfilling the job description of what you need to have them do as a level 2 officer. During that period of time, when they are under their provisional leadership, they are submitted, they receive a letter, as does the agency, that when they are leaving here, that they have to be under the direct supervision and control of a fully certified level 2 or level 3 officer. That is bolded in the letter that agencies and the person receiving the certification receive. Not only that, but in the level 2 initial training, they go over the scope of practice and what their limitations are. And at the end of that, before they leave here, I make sure that I speak to the level 2 candidates to make sure that they are aware. If there are any questions around scope of practice, we discuss those, but that they are also under that provisional certification. So if anything happens where they act outside of that scope, it is their certification, which means it will impact them. We also make sure that they're aware that don't let an agency, whether intentionally or not, put you in a situation where you will be acting on your own, because that will be outside of your scope of practice. So I only bring that up to make sure that this is just another reminder, not only to those that have level 2 certification, but those agencies that employ those folks, that direct control and supervision must be maintained while they are out there. It's listed in statute, not the direct supervision and control, but that until they are fully certified, they cannot exercise law enforcement without completing a basic training course. And that means completing council rule under council rule 15 and rule 17, which highlights level 1 and level 2. And it states right in there under the rules section B, under both rules 15 and 17, that the level 2 law enforcement officer is issued a provisional 12-month certification that grants them law enforcement authority, but only under the direct supervision and control of a fully certified level 2 or level 3 officer. So I just want to reiterate that one more time, and I'm happy if anyone has any questions or comments about that. Amazing. It's always quiet. I often wonder if I'm losing connectivity or what. But okay, I can't be any clearer on those topics, and that's really the end of my director's report. So I will pass it back to you, Chair.
All
Can
right.
I ask a question?
Thank you.
Chris?
Oh, by all means.
Go
ahead.
As far as the PT test for candidates, would that apply to waiver students as well?
That would not apply to waiver students. That's just folks that are coming in for the entrance test and getting into the basic program.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right. Any further questions for Chris? Okay, great. A nice segue into our next agenda item about the Professional Regulations Subcommittee. And the Executive Director Burkell and I discussed this after some of the discussion we had at our last meeting, and thought it would be good to, and particularly with a number of new members on the council, to do a flyover on the subcommittee and learn a little bit more, so there's a little more clarity and understanding about what they do. So I'll turn the floor over to Trevor Whipple, who's the chair of that committee.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And hopefully it's a high enough level flyover, not too granular, but certainly if folks have questions or want to pursue a little further, a number of folks, whether it be our executive director, Vagar as our investigator, certainly myself, would be happy to delve a little bit deeper. So I prepared a document which I'm going to read, and hopefully it won't be too mundane, but I wanted to be able to stay on task and cover the salient points here. So for those that may not be aware, the professional regulation of law enforcement officers really became a heightened focus, certainly post George Floyd, as I believe it should have been. And the Vermont legislature passed what we affectionately call Act 56. We all refer to it as Act 56. The more robust term is the Professional Regulation of Law Enforcement Officers. And that law was passed, and it came into effect here in Vermont July 1 of 2018. So any complaint dealing with the professional conduct of a police officer pre-July 1 of 2018 falls outside our purview. And those cases, we run into one every now and then. It's been very rare. The cases pre-July 1, 2018, the only action the council could take would be for an adjudication of a felony if a police officer was found guilty of a felony. Fortunately, those have all but been, we've gone through all those, and everything we're encountering now has been after July 1 of 2018. So upon, the passage of this law, also there was a passage of a law that made this council more robust. It gave us the community members that we have on the council now, and it took until late December of 2020 for the current council to really come into the formation that it's in now. By the time the additional appointees were made, the governor's office made their appointments, and then almost immediately after constituting that full council, the then chair of the council developed the Professional Regulations Subcommittee and made the initial appointments to that subcommittee. It was decided that the Professional Regulations Subcommittee would consist of 5 members. There were 2 members representing the community. They remain the initial members, that being Sean Pratt, Kareem Chapman. There was then a member who would represent a non-law enforcement agency. That was Karen Transgard Scott, who continues to this day. The initial member to represent sworn law enforcement was our current executive director. Chris Burkell was appointed when he was the chief of police in Brandon. And when he became the deputy director, then Chief Frank was appointed to fill that sworn law enforcement officer position. And the then chair also established a fifth position, that being someone who represented former law enforcement, and myself from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. We began meeting in early 2021 with a bit of a backlog of cases, as you can imagine. This law came into effect July 1 of 2018, but it took a period of time to really constitute the council, then develop the subcommittee, then develop our procedures. And so we've been working hard since then, based upon procedures that were passed by this full council. As Chris has already said, professional regulation complaints, we prefer, and the system was primarily designed that those complaints would be made to the department, to the agency where the law enforcement officer in question was employed. But legislature did provide other avenues, as our director spoke of this morning, such that folks can report those on anonymously if they wish on the web portal. We've had some by email, some by telephone. That can be directly to the law enforcement agency, or they can come directly to the council. If they come to the council and it's a complaint that's not against the executive officer, then our executive director would forward those to the agency that the officer is employed by. If they are, in fact, a complaint made against the executive of the agency, the head of the law enforcement agency, the law provides that the council then has the investigation conducted, so that if the executive director felt that that was a credible complaint, it would then be forwarded to the council's investigator, and in our case, currently, VAGAR, to conduct that investigation on our behalf. Once the case has been completed, it's then submitted back to the council if it comes from the law enforcement agency. If it comes from VAGAR, then VAGAR simply brings back the completed case. Then it's agended for our review in the Professional Regulation Subcommittee. VAGAR will place it on the agenda. There are two agendas prepared. One is the public-facing agenda, which includes just case numbers. And then there's a back-facing agenda that's given just to the committee that actually has links to our case materials. And those by statute are confidential. That's why those materials are not made available in the public agenda. We then, VAGAR gives us a pretty robust amount of time, and I appreciate that. One of the sheer joys of now having a full-time investigator is that VAGAR can produce our agenda well in advance of the meeting, links to the materials. It's then up to we as Professional Regulation Subcommittee members to review those case materials, to review them as almost a prosecutor would in a criminal matter. We take it very seriously. These matters, cases that do come forward, can have an impact on police officer certification. They can have an impact on a community if we have a police officer out there who is functioning outside the bounds of the professional regulation requirements. So some of these cases may be small. They may have just written materials that may take an hour or two to review. There are other cases that have a robust amount of sometimes audio recorded interviews, cruiser cameras, body cameras, and I've had some cases, one case, where it can take up to 6 hours or more to review those materials and prepare for one of our meetings. Once the Professional Regulation Subcommittee reviews those materials, we have instances where we may have questions. We may think there's a file missing. We may have an additional request of an agency. We want to see something, a different report. We think that there might be some video that didn't make it to us. So we work through VAGAR to go back to that agency, make additional requests. There have been times when we've made additional investigative requests, asked to have something else explored as part of that investigation so that we can make a full review of the matter. Once we have reviewed all those materials, then it's contingent upon us to make a determination. There are some times when we see a case come forward where we may feel that it's not even within our purview. Not all complaints against police officers are, by statute, a professional regulation complaint that meet our legal definitions. So some that we review, we find that it's not within our legal purview, and they're simply returned to the agency for internal agency outcomes. And just because we don't have the ability to take any action on these complaints, it does not mean that an agency has no ability to take action. An agency can still utilize their internal disciplinary process to hold officers accountable from their standpoint in their agency. If we can take a number of other avenues where we can have a finding, if we find that it's what we call a category B1, and the law lays this out, I'm not going to go that granular in detail this morning, but if the law lays out that it meets the category B1 or first offense standard, then we can't take any action other than a finding. There can't be any action against the officer. The statute was designed such that it's almost tantamount to a written warning that we would see in most employment cases. It puts an officer and an agency on notice that, yes, we have found that there was a violation, but it's not actionable on our behalf. But it's also a notice that should they come before us again for an additional Category B violation, then in fact we could take action. And the law has now opened up a little bit broader that there are certain things under a Category B offense that we do have the ability to take action on, such as domestic violence instances, certain other egregious behaviors, use of force issues, where we can take action on a first offense Category B. We also can suspend an officer's certification. The law only allows that a certification can be suspended for the same duration and time of a potential suspension that an agency has issued to the officer. And then we can, in the most egregious cases, we can take action where an officer's certification is revoked with the ability to recertify, and we do put provisions in those situations where we may revoke an officer's certification and have the ability to recertify, but in a year, where there's a 1-year kind of growth opportunity, and then the officer can reapply, restart the training process from scratch. And then there are also instances where there's a permanent revocation. The behavior is so egregious that it's our belief that that officer should be prohibited from ever being a police officer in the state of Vermont again. I know that there's been some questions recently of the full council when you have had stipulated agreements come before you. When the Professional Regulation Committee has a finding of an offense, whether it be a B1, a Category A, or a Category C, and we make a finding that those have in fact happened, and we have what we call a notice of hearing, saying, yes, we've found that this violation has happened. We want a notice to have a hearing before the council, before the rest of you folks who are not part of the Professional Regulation Subcommittee. But what we also do is we provide to the council's attorney some kind of parameters for a potential stipulated agreement. This is, in my most simple terms, helps me understand it, is that I equate this to, in a criminal matter, kind of the equivalent to a plea bargain. It's the potential for a known outcome. It's the potential to address any foreseeable challenges in the matter. And we many times, maybe almost always, provide some, I call them guardrails, but some guidance on a potential stipulated agreement. And why would we do that? One, to respect the time of the council. If one of these matters comes forward to a full hearing, and we've seen certainly one, can take a full day or more. And we have to have a quorum of the council to hear these matters. We know that folks are busy. So in the end, if we can come to an agreement, an outcome that gets gets the most important outcome for us, then we see that as something that's viable and potentially preferred. Also, when we have a hearing before the council, it's an unknown outcome. We don't know what might happen. We don't know what what the full council might do. So to have a stipulated agreement, it's a guaranteed known outcome. You agree on what that outcome will be. We've also taken a very hard look at many of these cases, some in particular involving domestic violence situations where there are actual human victims of these police officers. And should that matter move forward to a hearing, those victims would be asked to come forward and testify and face their accuser, as those accused have the right. And we look at the potential re-victimization, the fragility of those victims or witnesses, maybe even the inability for them to relive what happened and the inability to testify, so that if we could get an outcome, maybe it's not the exact outcome we wish, maybe it's not worded as harshly or doesn't have as granular detail as we wish, but it's a known guaranteed outcome. So we work hard on that as well, and would always be happy to hear input on that, certainly. So to kind of wrap up, we meet. We've had a pretty rigid schedule. We meet every 2 weeks, or we meet the first and third week of the month. So we meet twice a month. We have anywhere from 3 to 5 cases in those meetings that we try to get through. Sometimes we don't, and we have to push them off to the following meeting. We have, I'm pleased to say, we've substantially, if not completely, caught up on our backlog from those years when the cases just kind of went into queue. So the cases we're seeing now are much more timely. I know that there's been some question in the past by agencies even, we might review a case that, a few months ago that was submitted in 2022 or 2023. And, there's a question about why now? Well, at 3 to 5 cases a meeting, it took a while to get through these. And then, to conclude, just real thumbnail, these are not exact figures, but I think that it speaks to this process being used. I appreciate the directors offering that a majority, almost all, our cases come directly from law enforcement agencies. So they are taking this process seriously. They're utilizing it as legislature intended, utilizing it for the betterment of the profession. And thus far, at my count, since I've been involved, I would say that there's been about 280 complaints that have come forward. Now, many of those are complaints that didn't meet the standards, so they didn't go anywhere. They referred back to the agency for agency issues, and they never came back to us. My records show that we, the Professional Regulation Subcommittee, have reviewed about 196 of those. So I really appreciate my colleagues on the committee and the work that's gone into that. And look forward to doing more and to serving this council and serving the profession and serving the community. So with that, I certainly would be happy to entertain any questions or thoughts. And thank you, Chair, for the opportunity.
Great, Trevor. Thank you. That was a nice, comprehensive overview. We do have a hand up, Sean Pratt. Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is well. I just wanted to say how much of a privilege it's been to serve on the subcommittee and be able to work with the people that I'm able to work with and learn every day about the work that we're doing. Again, I just, the work is so important and is needed. And I just enjoy the people that I work with. They have given me reason to believe that we are trying to solve a lot of these issues. So I just wanted to reiterate the fact that, I appreciate being on the subcommittee, and I appreciate working with the people that I work with. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Sean. Thanks. And I think right now, many of you know, Chief Frank has left, and She was a founding member, if you will, of the subcommittee. So we are looking at who that law enforcement replacement will be. I think you saw, as Trevor pointed out, this is a pretty substantial committee. There's a lot of work. It's a very important committee. So we'll be moving forward on that. But he did review the membership of that and the history. That was very helpful as well, just to kind of frame it in regard to. I would say it's a relative newness. It's comparative, but compared to the Republic of Vermont, it's new. A few years old, and really, I think we're learning a lot from this process, as well as the. I think, in working collaboratively with law enforcement is encouraging to see that the agencies themselves, and I've been on the council long enough now to see a number of the stipulated agreements, to see the work that goes into those, and really, I think, balancing a number of issues with, I think, an important and fair outcomes at some level. We could argue a little bit about that, I think, maybe from time to time, but to underscore what Trevor mentioned, if you can imagine, if we took 196 cases that they have reviewed and they went to full hearing, that would be your full-time job. We would be in hearings that could be quite substantial. So I think many of the matters are very effectively resolved through this process and working with the agencies, and with the committee and the stipulated agreements. Do we have any other questions or observations, Director Brickell?
Yeah, just one more, just to address what sometimes we anecdotally hear from the outside is that, a lot of times people will see a stipulated agreement or action that the subcommittee has taken, and they say, well, all the council does is they get these and they're looking to decertify officers, and that could be the furthest thing from the truth. This committee takes a lot of time, has a lot of deep conversations, reviews a lot of policy to make sure that those allegations either meet the definition of the statute or they don't. And the other piece to that is that when you do see action from the subcommittee coming out to the council and the council has taken action, almost always the law enforcement agency before that has taken action. So this is not the council going after someone's certification. Very often the agency has already remedied that situation that they had with that officer by doing the right thing as well. So I don't want that impression to be of that subcommittee and or of the council that they are just this body that looks to decertify people, because that's really the furthest from the truth.
Trevor?
And just one final piece, and I did not indicate this at the end, but there was only about 90 of those 196 that we even had findings on. So more than half were found to be either not a violation or not within our purview. So I would certainly support what the director offers. This isn't a committee that's out to belittle officers, or we're not a committee. It's we do due diligence and realize that a number of these complaints, in fact, don't meet the standard, or maybe some of that weaponization where they just simply, the facts aren't there to determine anything.
Great. Do we have any further questions for Trevor or the director on the PRS? Well, we're scheduled for the third week, so we may or may not have some action for our next meeting later this month from the committee. So thank you, Trevor. That was a very nice overview, and provides a nice framework for us going forward. Moving on in the agenda, distributed with the materials. Well, let me back it up a little bit. The last meeting we had discussed, and there was some favorable reaction to the idea of the council providing a statement in regard to the current enforcement environment, specifically as it affects the FIP efforts and policy. And I think the consensus was to come back if there was some specific language that the council could discuss um, before taking any action, that we would do that at this meeting. And that has been provided in the materials that were sent to you in advance. I'll ask Director Burkell if there's any other background, but then this is to open up, this section of the agenda is to open up discussion about that statement and the council's endorsement of that. But Director Burkell, did you have any other background or comments that you'd like to make?
Um, no other comments. I think I'll let Lisa's work and others who kind of reviewed this and piece it together, present it to you, and they can give you the background on how this document got to where it's at.
Okay. Is Lisa with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you
Yeah,
perfectly.
I apologize. I'm homesick, so I'm keeping my camera off. Um, Thank you, Chair
Like,
Clements,
like many of
and
us.
yeah, and Director Brickell. I wanted to provide a bit of background about kind of how we got to this conversation about this statement and letter. And basically, I had been contacted by uh, a couple community members and advocacy groups and organizations regarding the FIP policy, really pertaining to the immigration piece and Vermont law enforcement's interactions with federal immigration authorities, and that there was a lot of fear from certain communities who have been impacted by these executive orders from the federal government, and asking kind of what were we doing about it. And of course, I'm always referring back to the policy, but recognized that um, although our policy is very kind of in depth and it's a great policy, that it would be really important to kind of pull out the pieces in a really digestible and understandable way regarding law enforcement's interactions with federal immigration authorities. So this letter was drafted with support of the members of the Fair and Impartial Policing Subcommittee. So what you see is not set in stone, but it's the latest draft and updates. And the real hope with this letter is to be able to send it out in various forums to impacted and vulnerable communities, and also just to the state of Vermont, to really highlight what law enforcement's interactions and responsibilities are with federal immigration authorities, to really kind of alleviate some of the worry and provide clarity, again in kind of a simplified and digestible way, but that still holds to the meaning of the policy. So that's kind of the background of it. I want to thank the the committee members and other folks who contributed to this, and I'm happy to answer any questions or provide any other feedback that you might have. But I really think this would be a really good step to provide some transparency to impacted and vulnerable communities. And the other piece of this that I just want to mention now, so I don't forget, is that I've been working with Susanna Davis's Office of Racial Equity, and they have generously provided us support in translating both the FIP policy, the entire policy, but also this letter into 14 different languages, including ASL interpretation with video and captioning, so that it is accessible to all our members of the community, which I am just so grateful for and so excited to be moving forward with that. So I'll stop there. And if folks from the committee or Director Burkell, you have anything to add, please do, but happy to answer any questions.
Sorry.
No comments from me other than to also acknowledge that it's an extreme cost to have not only the policy, but this letter, when it's completed in its form, translated into 14 different languages. So again, I also appreciate that effort by the Office of Racial Equity to help us manage that.
Great. Lisa, I do have a question. Because given the document that we got, I think it's a good summary. It's really taking the policy and putting it into a more compact, if you will, form. What's the you mentioned letter in various avenues. I think you've described what the audience is, but how do you see what we have received, which we can talk about? Folks have any comments about what's in the content of that, but also kind of putting on that effective communications hat. There might be various forms of this. And where do you see it going? How do you see it getting out there, if we will? What are the channels and what are the target audiences?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for your question. I think one thing that would be wonderful if, the council were to accept this would be to do some sort of press release so that it can be widely distributed. To also put it on our website. I would encourage also individual agencies to do the same and to share directly with some of those different advocacy groups and organizations that are being affected by these orders and need a little clarification and understanding to help make things calmer for them, or at least attempt to. So I think there's a few different ways that we can send it out. And certainly I think the press release would be the most widely distributed and accessible for folks.
Okay. Council members, at the last meeting, we had consensus to do this. Do you have any observations on the content that Lisa had distributed to us? I think what we're moving toward then, and I'd like to be sure that we have some discussion, because we know that at least, when things go out into a press release, a number of directions, who knows what can happen, right? Obviously, we would like positive things to come from that, just so that we're prepared, and particularly as council members, that you're prepared and are aware of this if asked about it, and to promote it. But I think we're moving toward. I'm kind of grappling with this now. I think maybe a motion to endorse the statement with, is there any direction that we want to provide Lisa or the executive director on its distribution, et cetera? I'm throwing that all out there. Chris.
Yes, thank you. And I don't want to interrupt the motion of where you're going. I just want to say there was a lot of good work and a lot of review of this document. Having said that, we don't currently have legal counsel. That doesn't mean that legal folks were not enlisted for help to take a look at this document. But knowing that we do have some attorneys on this call and on this meeting, I guess my question would be, is there anything that jumps out that would be problematic? I think we've reviewed the policy to make sure that Lisa's draft, to try to make it clear for those that don't understand law enforcement policy. It's an attempt to say what law enforcement can and what law enforcement can't do. So I just want to make sure that if anyone has concerns over those, that they're either raised now or if there are none, that's this as well as also.
Counselors?
I just wanted to jump in to say that yesterday when I was reviewing this, I was very happy with, one thing lawyers are great at doing is making things incomprehensible to the rest of us, right? So I was very happy to see, from my perspective, I can go and make sure everything's accurate legally, do the research. I think it is probably prudent to make sure you have an attorney that did it. If there was somebody involved in this, that's great. But I really like how accessible the language is. And I love how it's been translated into 14 different languages because, those are the people that are going to be most affected. So, there isn't a point of writing this whole statement if people can't understand it. So I'm so excited that this was done. I'm from the Human Rights Commission. We've been hearing nothing but fear, from community members about what is happening elsewhere in the country and what could happen here in Vermont. So I think this is going to help a lot of people feel better. So I'm very happy that this was done.
Thank you, Kelly. Counselor McManus.
Hello, Council. I'm here on behalf of the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs. I just wanted to put in, I do not see, to Chris's question, I don't see anything contrary to the policy in this letter, and that is the most important piece from our perspective. As long as this letter accurately reflects the fair and impartial policing policy, then at least from a legal perspective, I don't think there's an issue. So I think, for council members reading this, just to look more at the tone and the messaging, like if that's what the council, on the council's behalf, wishes to put out to the communities. As far as the actual nuts and bolts of the letter, again, I think it pulled directly from the policy, and that was important from our perspective, that the language was simplified, but not so simplified that we then misrepresent the policy. That was the most important objective of this letter, and I think Lisa did that. So that's the only piece I have to weigh in, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other comments, etc.? Okay, well, hearing none, I'm hearing support for the document. I think just to clarify, Lisa, this would be released as a press release and then distributed to a number of channels that you mentioned earlier.
Yes, Chair, I think that's the plan.
So we're talking about the letter, but I think if we're more clear that we're looking at what would be a press release with some wider distribution, with varied distribution.
Yes.
Okay. Would we like a motion at this point? I think we may be ready to act on this, to endorse this.
Happy to make a motion.
Okay, how would we word that motion? For the record.
I'll let you, what I would say is that I move to endorse it, but whatever
Okay.
language you'd like.
Okay. I think what I'm hearing is that the council endorses the statement on FIP to be distributed as a press release to varied communities in Vermont, communities and agencies in Vermont. Does that sound
Perfect.
I'm looking? Lindsay, did you get that? That was free form. Any edits to that motion? The language of that motion. Could you, if you got it, could you read it back? And I'm putting you on the spot.
Endorsed a motion to endorse the distribution of the FIP statement as a press release to communities and agencies in Vermont.
Okay. If that's
so moved.
agreeable, Okay, Kelly has moved that. Do we have a second? I know this is a group that takes a while to move and second.
I'll second, Chair Clements.
Okay, seconded by McManus. Okay, now the motion is fully on the floor. We can have further discussion about it. I'll entertain any questions in that regard before we would move to a vote. Okay, I'm hearing silence. If you can do that, if you can hear silence. I'll move to the vote then. All of those in favor of adopting that motion signify by saying aye or raising your hands.
Aye.
Aye.
See if Lindsay can get things there. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries and approved. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the final agenda item. This will be, I'll frame it a little bit. One of the things that I saw when I first came on last summer as chair of the council was first, on the learning curve, the need to understand the council structure, et cetera. But one of the things that I'm still learning about, and Trevor's presentation today helped tremendously too, filling out some more depth in that area, is the committee structure and committee activity. And Chris Burkell and I have been talking about this on and off, and are moving in a direction of kind of reviewing what we have for committees and kind of assessing that. We intend to be back next month, next month's meeting with a document that will be kind of an inventory of the committees to put some structure, a little more clarity and transparency, public transparency around what are the committees of the council, what do they do, a little bit more detail, and have that all in one place. And any number of items, I think, to move into a standard format so that there's not a lot of questions about, well, how many members are there? How long are they appointed for? Who should be a member? How do we consider members on committees from outside the council itself? Because there's a lot of work to be done. And of course, also the question of, are there some committees that we don't need anymore? And are there some committees that we might want to consider forming that we don't have now? So it's part of the process and discussion that we've been having. Director Raquel, I'll turn it over to you for your comments and kind of what you've been doing with Lindsay and kind of assembling and looking at in our committee structure.
Thank you, Chair. And again, you stole most of my thunder. This is going to be really an initial conversation for, for council education and to understand how committees work. There's been a lot of, I think, fluidity around committees and how they function and what their responsibilities are and how you become a member. And this is really a discussion so that we can more formalize like what that process is, what it looks like, so that everyone is on the same page, everyone knows the responsibilities. So for us, we know that there are some committees that need some revision. There are some committees of the council that no longer meet or don't have a function any longer. They were created to either study a certain piece of legislation or a mandate by the legislature. And so we just want to make sure that we start to structure committees so that they're all functioning the same. And we give council members the ability to get onto a committee for the purpose of helping move what happens here at the academy. That's the most important piece. So what we wanted to do is just make sure that that everybody understands what that structure looks like. And so, for instance, we talked about committees having a chair and a vice chair, things like term limits of those chairs or an annual vote on the chair and vice chair seats. What's the purpose of the committee, and is the purpose now, as it's defined, still the same purpose of that committee? The process for filling vacancies, as well as removing somebody for lack of participation and things like that. So we'd also like to have report outs from committee chairs, similar to what you heard from Trevor today on the Professional Regulation Subcommittee. His report, we would like to hear that from every committee that is a committee of the council, so that everyone on the council is up to date on what they're doing. So it was really a discussion around that. By council rule, the executive director is the person that has the authority to appoint members to committees and create committees with the advice and the consent of the chair of the council. But for practice wise, you know, I've had discussions with some chairs of committees already, and making sure that we wouldn't want to do anything without a chair's knowledge or input, because they've already been serving the council on a number of different levels. And so we want to take a look at, like, for instance, some committee that we might create on behalf of the council. We would want every committee to have at least a council member on it, but not all committees have to be made up solely of council members. They could have a council member, but then there could be people that have expertise out in the field, or law enforcement officers that might have an interest in being a part of a committee, or whatever the SME is that would be, you know, relative to that committee. That's who we would want to have a member of. The only thing for me that I would want to keep as solely a committee that is just made up of council members, and again, this is the initial discussion of this, but would be the Professional Regulation Subcommittee. And I think that's important because that makes decisions and reviews matters on an officer certification. And I don't think folks from the outside of those that regulate who actually authorizes a law enforcement officer to have their certification, that those issues should be decided strictly by council members that want to participate on that. So there was a makeup of that council before my time, what that was decided upon. I can say that it works well. I think it has value having two members that are, three members actually, that are non-law enforcement or have law enforcement past history. But that balance is delicate to have community members that have input into unprofessional conduct, but also needs the knowledge of what the profession of law enforcement does, so that those competing factors can have good discussions. But outside of that committee, I don't see any other committee that would have to be made up of sole council members. I think for me, the most important part in conversations that we have moving forward is getting council input on what committees do they think we need. I know of a couple already in my mind that I think we need committees for, that would help move council business as well as academy business moving forward. While this may not sound exciting, one is definitely a legislative committee, right? That's just an ongoing daily event that happens while the legislature is in session. And there's no way for somebody that's employed here to keep up with that on a regular basis. But we certainly have council members that do have regular presence in the State House, or have certain expertise that know that process, the fluidity of it, who is the best person to reach out to. So in my mind, that's just one committee in the future that I would like to see developed. But again, this is just an initial discussion. I would love to have council feedback on any thoughts for committees, and also any council members that have an interest in those committees, or committees that they want off of if they're already on a committee. The important piece is to respect everybody's time, and what I want to see for committee membership are folks that have the time to devote to the work that we need to have done. Because if you don't, there's no sense in being on a committee. It doesn't do any of us any good. So I think I'll leave it at that and see what I get for feedback from council members.
Thank you, Chris. I think that sums it up well as well. There'll be opportunities. If you have thoughts, I'd encourage you to send them to the director. Just shoot an email, because a number of you have been on committees, and I'm happy if anybody wants to volunteer their perspective now, or maybe their experience now. That would be great too. But next month, I said our plan next month is to be back with a more structured document. I think Chris raised an important point there about policy and process really for the committees. And it's really important and fundamental for a committee to have a clear charge, clear specification of membership, and a number of other dimensions. He mentioned, Chris mentioned, how folks get appointed, how long their terms are. And, sometimes, what's the process if a committee's not effective for removing it, and or individuals on the committee if they're not active as they should be, and as well as regular reporting out to the full body. That's a pretty standard practice in a lot of councils and organizations and things of this nature, to have some kind of report out to what's going on. So you'll be hearing more about this from us. We'll hope to have something tangible for you next month that will just be a nice structure there to look at, that'll kind of delve into these issues. Anybody have any observations at this point? Okay. It's a very talkative committee.
I just wanted to express my interest in potentially joining a subcommittee or being of assistance with anything that changes that we add in the future.
Thank you, Kelly, and should note our new members. We'll be looking at you too. So there's plenty to do. The long arm of the executive director may be reaching out. So. Okay, great. Well, we're looking forward to having this conversation in greater depth and moving forward on this. Again, I think it's as much good organization and knowledge within the council, and it's important for transparency of the council as well for the public. So I have no other items on the agenda. Hearing none, if there are any. To entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, I was waiting. We had a motion to adjourn, a second to that motion.
Second.
Okay, Tom Shanet. Thank you, Tom. All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Raising your hand. Any opposed? I suspected not. The meeting is officially adjourned, and we will see you in 3 weeks for our regularly scheduled hearings meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.